So, who was Arthur Shapiro? Arthur Shapiro was a Columbus, Ohio attorney and partner in the firm Short Shapiro Kelman Warren. His firm represented major corporate clients, including Les Wexner's company, The Limited, later L Brands. Shapiro personally managed The Limited's account. At the time of his death, he was 43 years old. Oh, I wonder how he died. Professionally, he sat in a sensitive spot, inside tax work and business structures for one of Ohio's biggest corporate success stories, while under his own tax cloud. Well, that's interesting because up until this point, it seems like Les Wexner had a real strong hold in things. And, as we've established and said multiple times, his family was on the board, plus Robert Murawski. And, all right, let's just see where this goes. IRS troubles and tax shelters. By 1985, Shapiro was in serious trouble with the IRS. He had failed to file federal income tax returns for about, wait for it, 7 years. Well, that's interesting. I'm no mathematician, but 1985, 7 years, what is that, 1978? Oh, 1978, the same year as Les Wexner's first acquisition. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, though. All right, let's see. He had invested in questionable tax shelters, and he was facing a federal investigation into tax evasion and related schemes. He was scheduled to appear before a federal grand jury to testify about those tax issues and whether others had helped conceal income. In one related case, Shapiro was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. His business associate, Barry Kessler, and others were convicted of helping him file false returns in the 1970s, while Shapiro faced no charges in that specific case, a setup that gave him potential leverage as a witness against others. Now we get into the murder. The murder, it happened on March 6th, 1985. The timing. Shapiro was murdered March 6, 1985, one day before his scheduled grand jury appearance. The event reconstructed from police records and later reporting. On that morning, Shapiro met an unidentified man in a red BMW at a Columbus cemetery for a secretive breakfast meeting. A witness later described the other man dressed in black with a broad brim hat and a limp. Sounds like Kaiser Sose. Shortly after 9:30, Shapiro suddenly fled the BMW. The other man chased him, firing a handgun, grazing Shapiro before he reached the door of a nearby condominium. As Shapiro pounded on the door, the man shot him twice in the head at close range. Then the man As Shapiro pounded on the door, the man shot him twice in the head at close range, then drove away in Shapiro's BMW. The car was found the next day in a mall parking lot, wiped clean of fingerprints. Police quickly characterized the killing as a professional mob-style hit. Official investigation and the Kessler theory. Mainstream accounts, Columbus Dispatch, Daily Beast, summarized on Wexner's page, line up on this core. The primary suspect for decades has been Shapiro's business associate, Barry L. Kessler, a Columbus tax accountant. Kessler worked closely with Shapiro in tax shelter schemes, was later convicted in Florida in 1994 for arranging another contract killing, his business partner John DeRue, showing he was capable of hiring a hitman. I mean, that makes sense. Had a history of entanglements in shady real estate tax deals and had been under suspicion but never charged in an earlier double murder of business partner Frank Yasinoff and fiancée Ella Rich. Claims reported years later by former employees say they saw a man matching the killer's description at Kessler's office the day after Shapiro's murder, and Kessler counting a large pile of cash before handing it to him. That's interesting. I wonder who those employees were, though. However, Kessler was never charged in Shapiro's murder. He went to prison for the DeRue case and died in there in 2005, never admitting involvement in Shapiro's killing. At some point, I got to look into the circumstances behind that death. Columbus police have said publicly that no suspect was ever definitively eliminated and the case remains officially solved. So in the narrow police talking to the mainstream press version, the story is tax lawyer about to testify, a shady accountant with a history of violent problem solving, and a hit that conveniently silences a witness. But then this is where it gets a lot more interesting. We have the Shapiro murder file and what it actually is. In 1991, the Columbus Police Organized Crime Bureau produced an internal memo titled The Shapiro Homicide Investigation, Analysis and Hypothesis, authored by analyst Elizabeth A. Leop and Commander Curtis Markham. It is not a normal case file, but an analytic document explicitly trying to figure out if this was a Mafia La Cosa Nostra hit, and who had contact with Shapiro, something to gain from silencing him, ties to La Cosa Nostra figures, and enough money to buy a contract killing. Key points in the file: it describes Shapiro's murder as strongly resembling a La Cosa Nostra hit and surveys mob families with presence in or near Ohio. It maps unusual interactive relationships among entities including the Limited and Les Wexner, Walsh Trucking Company of New Jersey, and a man named Frank Walsh, Omni Exploration, Omni Oil, the Edward J. DiBartolo Company, a Youngstown mall developer, and local developer John W. Kessler, not Berry. It notes Frank Walsh and Walsh Trucking was the primary transporter for the Limited and was under investigation by the New York Organized Crime Task Force, with notices sent to Walsh at 1 Limited Parkway, Columbus, the Limited's headquarters. Okay, so Frank Walsh, owner of Walsh Trucking Company, was the primary deliverer of, or the primary shipper of Limited merchandise, and they were getting their mail sent to the Limited headquarters. You follow? Both Walsh and DiBartolo had been identified in other states' reports as associates of the Genovese LaRocca crime family. On that basis, the memo hypothesizes that Les Wexner, via the Limited, was associating with at least 2 businessmen tied to organized crime, and that the Genovese LaRocca family might consider him a friend in the loose sense of a valuable associate. Well, it makes sense. I mean, if the guy's getting his mail to his business and he's delivering all of his goods. Crucially, the memo does not prove that Wexner ordered the hit, nor that any specific individual bought the contract. It explicitly omits the motive and the exact identity of whoever would benefit from Shapiro's death could not be determined with any certainty. It's an intelligence analysis document, lots of pattern mapping, some speculation, some plagiarism from other crime reports, which the memo itself admits, and a hypothesis that organized crime-linked businesses associates around Wexner fits the profile of someone that could arrange the hit. So they're basically saying, like, look, we don't have the smoking gun. We're not saying that he did it, but we should definitely look at him. And I don't understand why they didn't. I mean, just the fact alone, if you look, when Les Wexner had his first acquisition in 1978, at that point, if he's already affiliated and this guy, Arthur Shapiro, is involved in those deals, and he's not filing his taxes, and he's dealing with shady tax shelters, hiding money for other people, possibly people affiliated with the mob, and all these people are within the Limited's vicinity and direct contact in business with Les Wexner, to the point where these people are even using his headquarters as a mailing address. I mean, at some point, how much smoke do you need to see before you acknowledge the fire? But it gets even better. The suppression and resurrection of the file. The Shapiro murder file became controversial, not for what it proved, but for what the Columbus police leadership did with it. In the mid-1990s, Columbus Police Chief James Jackson ordered the destruction of the report, calling it wild speculation about prominent business leaders and potentially libelous. So the Columbus police chief gets this report that's connecting an awful lot of dots and makes an obvious case for an investigation, and to say the least, and he destroys it, calling it wild speculation and libelous. I mean, it kind of sounds like Kash Patel talking about Epstein, but I mean, that's just me, right? The file was long to be destroyed until an unredacted copy resurfaced and was obtained via public records request in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Later published by Columbus Alive and Columbus Free Press, and more recently mirrored on archive.org. And what do you know, guys? Wait, do I have it? And what do you know, guys? Look what we have here. It is the Shapiro homicide investigation. An analytic project opened in 1985 as a result of the mob-style murder of Arthur Shapiro, local attorney. I mean, if you want, I could read over all this. There's probably, obviously, a lot more details here than my notes. Strong similarities. All right, hold on. It says, Sir, an analytical project was opened in 1985 as a result of a mob-style murder of Arthur Shapiro, a local attorney in the law firm then Schwartz Shapiro Kelman Warren. Because of the strong similarities between this homicide and a Mafia La Cosa Nostra hit, the analysis included an in-depth study of major La Cosa Nostra groups having contact in or near Central Ohio area. These groups seem to include crime families in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and to some degree, the Genovese family in New York City. There seems to be very little reliable investigative literature concerning the Chicago and Detroit groups. However, we do have access reports, the Pennsylvania Crime Commission and the New Jersey Commission of the investigation with reference to groups in Ohio and areas to the east of us. The attached La Cosa Nostra information was lifted and in many cases blatantly plagiarized from those sources. Okay, so now my notes, that was the ChatGPT version. Now that we're reading the real thing, it's got a little bit more meat on that bone. So over here, it mentions the plagiarism, but it leaves out the fact that when they did this report, they're saying, look, like we have reliable information that Chicago and Detroit are not touching this, that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Alfred Tubman, the man that I referenced earlier, who was the mall connection for Les Wexner, he was a developer in Detroit. Not that there's any affiliation there, it's just something I wanted to point out. It stuck out in my mind. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission and New Jersey Commission of the investigation. So, New Jersey Commission, they're talking about Frank Walsh. Frank Walsh, who owned Walsh Trucking, who handled the shipping for the Limited. I believe that company was based in New Jersey. And that Omni Exploration, Omni Oil, that company was based in Pennsylvania. So that's why all this is coming together. Over time, the analysis of Shapiro homicide became greatly expanded and more complex with the development of unusual interactive relationships between the following business organizations. A, the Major Chord Jazz Club and its parent investment groups, now defunct. B, the Limited and its investment interest. C, the Walsh Trucking Company and the alleged relationship between owner Frank Walsh and the Genovese crime family. D, the law firm, now known as Schwartz, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. Homicide detectives report that the name was changed within hours of Shapiro's homicide. So they didn't even wait till the next day to take the guy's name off the door. I mean, is that not odd to anybody? E, Omni Oil Company. F, Edward DiBartolo Corporation of Youngstown, Ohio, and the alleged relationships between owner Edward DiBartolo and the Genovese crime family. And G, John W. Kessler, a local developer. So they're not even mentioning this Barry Kessler guy. They like, whoever did this report, This name, what's her name? Elizabeth Leah. She's saying this is where we need to look into this investigation. The primary sources for our information are intelligence summaries from investigators in our bureau, intelligence from Magloclan. Is that what that says? Magloclan? I don't know. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission and the New Jersey Commission of Investigation. The published reports from major media, newspapers, periodicals, copies of relevant reports are available for reference. Okay, so historical data. The Major Chord Jazz Club and Jessery 2 Limited Partnership now defunct. So Jessery 2 Limited Partnership was formed to own and manage the jazz club. This partnership is operated by Jessery 2 Corporation, of which Jerry Hammond was a president. Mr. Hammond was also president of Columbus City Council at the time. SNJC Holding Incorporated is named as an investor in the jazz club. It was incorporated August 6, 1987 by James H. Balthaser, attorney with Shorts, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. This law firm was legal counsel for the Limited. The address for SNJC Holding is Suite 3710 Huntington Center, the same address as Wexner Investment Company. So there are not just a lot of dots that could be connected, but there's a lot of, I don't know, in my opinion, evidence. I don't know if it'd be considered circumstantial, but I mean, there's a lot of, All right, let me just keep going. W&K Partnership was not registered and its owners could not be positively identified, but it is listed as an investor in the Jazz Club. It is noted, however, that Wexner and Kessler are co-developers of Wexley, and there was an annexation dispute involving the city of Columbus and Wexley land. It is possible that W&K Partnership was the forerunner of the New Albany Company through which Wexner and Kessler developed Wexley. The New Albany Company. I'm pretty sure. I think Epstein ended up being president of that. I swear to God, I didn't. This is the first time I'm actually reading the Shapiro homicide. Up until this point with my research, I only had my own file. The Smith-Hale Partnership was the investment of Ben W. Hale Jr. and Constance Smith in the Jazz Club. Mr. Hale and Smith's husband, Harrison W. Smith, are partners in the law firm and who represented Wexley developers, Wexley, Kessler, and the land annexation. Other related entities. The law firm, now known as Shorts, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. Yo, I can't get over that they changed the name the same day the guy was shot. It says hours after he was killed. They boom, replaced him. Wexner Investment Company was incorporated December 31st, 1987 by Stanley Schwartz as an agent. So they kept working with the firm. So Arthur Shapiro basically gets executed and one of his partners continues the business and takes over. Samax Trading Corporation, a company Wexner controls, was incorporated in July 1985 by Stanley Schwartz, who described the purpose. The privately held company is engaged in business liquidation. Through Samax, Wexner acquired 70% of Omni Exploration in August 1985. Stanley Schwartz was elected to the board of directors with Wexner. Walsh Trucking Company was the major trucking company for the Limited. Francis Frank Walsh, owner and president, allegedly has strong ties to the Genovese crime family. In July 1984, National Westminster Bank of New York notified Frank Walsh Finance Resources Company that the New York Department of Law Organized Crime Task Force had issued a subpoena for Frank Walsh's bank records. The notice was addressed to Frank Walsh Financial Resource at 1 Limited Parkway, the address of the Limited. Leslie Wexner and the Youngstown, Ohio developer Edward J. DiBartolo have a long history of partnership and business dealings. Mr. DiBartolo allegedly has strong ties to the Genovese LaRocca crime family. Okay, so Lex Wexner was mobbed up. He was mobbed up. And this is all before Epstein even got into the picture. This is crazy. Other data supporting linkage. Harold L. Levin, president of Wexner Investment Company, is also vice president of PFI Leasing Company. The two companies share a common telephone number on the 37th floor of the Huntington Center office building. The 37th floor of the Huntington Center is also the address for John W. Kessler Company and the New Albany Company. The Wexner Investment Company also has an office in Suite 1675 of the Huntington Center, as does the First Intercontinental Realty and Omni Exploration. The 16th floor is also one of two offices for the law firm of Schwartz, Kelm, Warren, and Rubenstein. So it is all one. No, I'm not going to say that. I can't say it's all one corporation, but they are very, very tight, and it makes sense. Remember, when Robert Murawski in 1972 started working with Les Wexner, he had to leave his other job, and he left his home to get closer. We also know that when Jeffrey Epstein started working with Les Wexner, that Wexner gave him multiple homes. A mansion in Manhattan, I believe, is worth about $80 million today. At the time, I think it went for 20. Gave him a home in Ohio. So, like, the whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein being some kind of anomaly where Les Wexner is this innocent, generous philanthropist. They got his name on a school. They got his name on a hospital, I think, and all this crap. And you know, this guy, like, this is crazy. He was mobbed up. Epstein didn't corrupt and take advantage of Les Wexner. Les Wexner brought him in. Arthur Shapiro was reportedly in direct contact with Vice Chairman Robert Murawski, number 2 at the Limited. Okay, so Robert Murawski, they're calling him number 2 at the Limited, and he gets into a clash with Jeffrey Epstein when Epstein first walks in the door, pretty much. Murawski's there 15 years. He's number 2. I mean, what does that tell you? It has been noted that Les Wexner and Edward DiBartolo have a long history of business partnerships. In June 1987, Robert Murawski abruptly and inexplicably left his employment with the Limited amid rumors of friction with Les Wexner. I wonder why. Murawski then appeared in the hierarchy of, can't pronounce the word, Campbell's Allied Stores, amid rumors that Wexner had planned to acquire the stores. DiBartolo had loaned financial backing. Allied Federated. Arthur Shapiro, a local attorney in the firm, then Schwartz, Shapiro, Kelm, and Warren, was murdered March 6, 1985 in a homicide having strong marks of a Mafia La Cosa Nostra hit. The homicide remains unsolved at this date. While all alternative remains open for this investigation, and the homicide is considered to be and is being treated as a hit. And the chief of police, this is the document that the chief of police destroyed. Did they ever do an investigation? Did he look into any of this? Did he make any calls? Was the FBI contacted? Would it have mattered? Like, is it just me? Like, this is crazy. This is crazy. The motive is unknown. Really? The motive is... They're being pretty generous there. All right. The motive is unknown. Homicide Squad investigators interviewed a number of associates, including the immediate family of the victim. Consensus was that Shapiro was a quiet, shy, private, secretive person and tended to be a loner. No one could suggest a reason for his murder. I mean, I could give you a couple reasons right now, but that's just me. It was learned that Shapiro was the subject of an investigation by Internal Revenue Service because he failed to file income tax returns for some 7 years prior to his death. Remember, 7 years prior to his death lines up perfectly with the 1978 acquisition of Mast Industries that kickstarted all the other acquisitions. The homicide occurred one day prior to Shapiro's scheduled appearance before a grand jury in the IRS investigation, and there was some conjecture that Shapiro was in a position to provide information to the grand jury that would have been damaging to some other party or parties. The identity of that party and the nature of that information, however, could not be determined with any certainty. Given the Mafia hit, another question is the identity of an individual who had the necessary contacts in the La Cosa Nostra and the personal financial resources to buy the contract. Thus, while the motive remains unclear, the suspect is an individual who knew Shapiro and had some professional contact with them, would benefit from his death, ensuring his silence, had close contacts with La Cosa Nostra figures or trusted La Cosa Nostra associates, had personal financial resources to afford the cost of the contract. Edward DiBartolo is a real estate developer out of Youngstown, Ohio, and is associated with Les Wexner of the Limited in Columbus. These subjects have well-known history of business and investment partners, and in 1986 attempted jointly to acquire Carter Hawley Hale department stores. Francis J. Frank Walsh is owner and chief executive officer of Walsh Trucking Company out of New Jersey. Oh, I was right, it is New Jersey. Walsh Trucking has been the primary transporter for the Limited in Columbus. In July 1984, Walsh was being investigated by the New York Organized Crime Task Force. Notices to this, okay, saying the same thing, that it was sent to Les Wexner's building.